Broadcast has been set. You may begin.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the September 17th, 2020 board meeting of Prince George's County, Maryland. Before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off your wireless devices as they may interfere with our proceedings. For those who are not able to observe now, our meeting will be recorded and the meeting will be available to the public on our website. At this point, I'll ask Mr. Thomas, Joshua Thomas, to please lead us in the board prayer as well as the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one moment. Let's pray. Oh God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, steer us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, for one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Ms. Ellis, at this point, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mrs. Ahmed.
Here.
Ms. Boozer-Strother.
Here.
Mr. Burrows.
Here.
Ms. Jackson.
Present.
Mr. Montero.
Here.
Mr. Murray.
Here.
Mrs. Queen.
Present.
Mrs. Shepherd.
Here.
Mr. Swan.
Present.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Valentine.
Here.
Mr. Wallace.
Present.
Mrs. Williams.
Present.
Dr. Thornton.
Here. And thank you, Ms. Ellis. And at this point, I want to thank Ms. King and Ms. Ellis and the board staff for preparing for our meeting, all the documents and that go into preparing for the Board of Education's meeting. So thank you all very much for that. Colleagues, at this point, if you'll turn your attention to the agenda for our September 7th meeting, and I'll receive a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Williams and seconded by Mr. Valentine that we adopt the agenda for the September 7th meeting of the Board of Education. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that is unanimous. Colleagues, would you please now turn your attention to our minutes from our September 3rd Board of Education work session. And a motion is in order to approve the minutes from our September 3rd work session.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Queen and seconded by Mr. Swan that the minutes of our September 3rd work session involving the capital improvement program be approved without modification. Those in favor? Yes.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. It's our work session minutes as well as our CIP hearing minutes. Just
I'm
for
sorry.
clarification.
Ms. Queen, do you recognize that as part of your motion?
Yes.
And Mr. Swan is a part of your second.
Correct.
So it is the minutes of our September 3rd work session and the CIP hearing for 22-27. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. The ayes have it. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that is unanimous. Colleagues, I'll now give you my brief chair's report. First, let me ask for a moment of silence for 4 of members of our family who passed since the last time we met. The first is Mary Juanita Stewart, a retired custodian from our SASA administration building. Ms. Stewart retired after 36 years. Also a moment of silence, please, for Pamela Williams, a paraprofessional educator at the Seat Pleasant Elementary School. Raven Moore, a night cleaner custodian at the Isaac Gordine Middle School. And finally, Ruby Briggs, a paraprofessional educator at the North Forestville Elementary School. Would you please join me in a moment of silence for members of our community? Thank you very much. Today, as Dr. Golson referenced earlier, is Constitution Day. It is a federally mandated Constitution Day, September the 17th. And I'll just say to the community the importance of Constitution Day, particularly given the historical events that are evolving around us. And I want to thank you, Dr. Golson, for reaching out to our schools and our teachers and our staff to facilitate activities around Constitutional Day, the curricular activities that took place. You'll recall that the Board of Education did pass a very powerful statement regarding Constitution Day. Those who have not read that statement from this board, please do so. You may access it in board docs, or if there's any member of the public who'd like to see that statement from this board, you may please request it and we will send it to you. Dr. Golson, I would also like to thank you and particularly Ms. Shepherd for raising again the idea that we need to speak to the public again regarding the 2020 census. And Dr. Golson, thank you again for reaching out to the community to remind the parents to fill out the census form. As a community, we are behind, as we traditionally are, in terms of the response. And being behind, that means that we will lose millions of dollars as a result of the non-participation in our census. Those who are concerned about funding for our children and services that they need, not filling out the census form indicates that you will not get the funds that you expect to have. We always say that if you are not counted, you don't exist politically. You don't exist politically if you are not counted in our constitutional system. So please, when you get the notice from Dr. Golson and as a part of the robocall, please fill out the form. You have until September 28th, members of the community, please fill it out. We are always undercounted as people of, as Hispanic, Latino people and Black people, lower income people, those three categories, always undercounted, and we lose millions and millions of dollars for our children. So thank you very much. We did, I want to speak to the public and say on behalf of the board that we did, as we're required to do statutorily, we did evaluate our superintendent of schools, and the Board of Education evaluated Dr. Golson and completed that in July, and gave Dr. Golson a deserved excellent evaluation. As a result of that evaluation, we did award Dr. Golson a cost of living adjustment of 2.5%, which is consistent with what other employees in the system received. We also awarded her a performance adjustment for her excellent performance as our executive officer of the school system up to that is not added to her salary. That is a one-time performance adjustment, which is not added to her base salary. Our CEO's base salary now is $309,550. And so I wanted to make sure the public is aware of the board's action in that regard. Thank you, Dr. Golson, for the excellent leadership that you're providing for our school system.
Thank you.
I want to say to the Board of Education, the community is recognizing your continued engagement with the community around COVID-19. Thank you for facilitating feeding, other kinds of needs that families have. People see you out there. You're in the community, and I want to say on behalf of me, certainly the chair, and I'm sure of our colleagues to each other, that we thank you for your engagement. There's great pain in our community, great pain in terms of nutritional needs, employment, and just other things. And so thank you, Board, for representing us so well in that space. The next committee meetings, keep in mind to the public, the board is organized around three very strong committees. It's not just the board. We have three very strong committees that do the work of the board. The Policy and Governance Committee will meet on September 24th. As a public, you are invited to observe those committee meetings. That committee is led by Ms. Boozer-Struther and Ms. Ahmed. Their next meeting is on the 24th of September. Our Academic Achievement Committee will meet next on September 29th. That committee is led by Ms. Shepherd and Mr. Montero. So please, public, not only the board meetings, but also our committee meetings, please observe them. The next Board of Education meeting will take place on October 8th. And this is, again, will be a virtual meeting of the Board of Education as we are now having. Zoom login details for our board meetings as well as our committee meetings can be found on the Board of Education's website, so please go there to access our proceedings. At this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Golson to please give us her report as our CEO.
Thank you. Good evening. As the third week of school comes to a close, I hope your child is enjoying classes. Help us keep the virtual learning environment safe by talking to your children about etiquette during virtual instructional sessions. Students are expected to follow classroom rules and use video, audio, and chat features appropriately. Please remind your children to share classroom Zoom links publicly. This month, students will take our fall bridging diagnostic assessment to help teachers and staff improve instruction. The test will be given at home using the Pearson Test Nav software, which is already downloaded to all Prince George's Public School issued devices. Students using personal devices must download the software before testing. For details or technical assistance with all learning software, visit our Reopen PGCPS website at www.pgcps.org/reopen. You can also contact one of our 9 parent centers Mondays and Wednesdays from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then once again 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on those same days. Or you can call 240-696-3315 during these hours to receive live assistance. I'd like to thank all the families who participated in our Hispanic Heritage Month telephone town hall on Tuesday. The event was hosted entirely in Spanish to share updates for the new school year and answer questions and concerns. As a reminder, school meals are free for all students until December 31st, 2020. You can pick them up in designated neighborhood schools on Mondays and Wednesdays between the hours of 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. or from a community meal delivery site. No ID is required for students picking up meals, but adults picking up without students should bring their child's student ID. Please continue to our Reopen PGCPS website for the latest updates. The site features the final Reopen PGCPS report, summary report. That summary report outlines our comprehensive data distance learning plan and links to school registration, school supply, meals, and state required immunization. Although we're currently using a distance learning model, the state still requires immunizations for school attendance. So please be sure your child's immunizations are up to date. We will be partnering with the Prince George's Health Department and the Maryland Partnership for Prevention to provide free immunization clinics in October. Information will be shared with families soon. Thank you to students and families for sharing your distance learning photos this month. Our students are Prince George's County Public School proud, and we continue to be Prince George's County Public School strong. Thank you. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Golson, for that excellent report. And it is an opportune time for me to, on behalf of the board, to recognize the fact that you were selected as one of our region's most prominent and effective leaders, a person who makes things happen. So we were very pleased to see your face among the 4 or 5 leaders in the region for making things happen. We're proud of you, and thank you for it. That was by the Washington Business Journal. As you know, that's one of the major publications in the region that recognizes strong leadership. So I want to thank the board for supporting you in your work and making this accomplishment possible. Congratulations, Dr. Golson.
Thank you, and thank you for the support.
At this point, I want to say to the public that we deeply appreciate your comments that you are sending to us as a part of the public comment section of the board. We're getting a large number of comments, messages, and videos and others speaking to issues before the Board of Education. Obviously, one of the most important issues before us now is the SRO issue, so we appreciate all the comments that we've gotten recently regarding that, both from individuals as well as from organizations. Dr. Golson, we'll now proceed to the consent agenda, and if you would please introduce items 4.1 through 4.3.
Yes, items 4.1 through 4.3 requires board approval of proclamations commemorating World Space Week, National Day of Writing, and Read the Record Day.
Colleagues, a motion is in order to approve 4.1 through 4.3.
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded that by Ms. Queen and Mr. Swan that items 4.1 through 4.3 be approved. Hearing no discussion, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that items 4.1 and 4.3 are approved unanimously by the board. Dr. Golson, would you please introduce now items 5.1 and we will pull 5.2 for discussion.
Item 5.1, approval of the October 2020 expenditure requirements.
May I have a motion for discussion?
So moved.
Second.
Some proper moved and seconded by Mr. Swan, who made the motion. I think Ms. Miller-Strother made the motion. Mr. Swan seconded. Any discussion of 5.1? Hearing none. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that item 5.1 expenditure requirements is approved without dissent. We pulled item 5.2. Ms. Ahmed, you have questions or comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Dr. Golson, there was just one big thing with the special education staffing plan that I was concerned about, and that's how you've accounted for COVID-19 in that plan. It wasn't very evident for me, so could that be spoken to in some regard?
So in terms of staffing, we did not have to adjust our staffing because of COVID-19 because we are continuing to implement as if we were in an actual in-person experience. So even though we didn't have to reduce, we increased, we did literally, our staffing is based on our per pupil number, and we'll continue to implement based on that. In terms of additional items that we've had to do, for example, if it's related to testing, we've used CARES Act money to help to fund that, but that's not related to this item. 5.2 is actually around staffing to decrease or increase, and we did it solely based on our projected enrollment that we thought we would have now.
Okay, and there's nothing on the state that requires any type of COVID adjustment. So you're saying all the COVID adjustment is based upon the CARES Act money, and it's not necessarily needed to be transferred over to this document?
That is accurate.
Okay, thank
It
you.
has nothing to do with staffing.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. And as a part of this, before we vote on it, we certainly have noticed the number and percentage of our children needing special education services. What we are going to do is ask our Academic Achievement Committee to work with Dr. Golson to look at that in some detail. The combination of the percentage of our children needing special education services and the 63% or so of those who are economically needy, that is a very serious combination that we as a board have to address. So we're going to ask, please, Mr. Montero and Ms. Shepherd to please work on that for the board and see what that mix is producing for us. Colleagues,
Definitely on the agenda.
thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, the vote is on item 5.2. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposing say no. I don't see any objections, Ms. King, so that is approved without objection. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 6.0. Recall, colleagues, that in June 11th, we tabled the motion to remove SROs from our school system. We're bringing it back now as a second reader, as a motion to be considered by the Board of Education. We will consider that motion first with discussion, and if that motion succeeds, then that takes care of the issue. If it does not, we will then proceed to the OBACA committee report regarding this particular issue. So at this point, that motion is appropriate for discussion. And any board member who wants to move that may do so, and we will discuss it, and then we will vote.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Murray moves it and Ms. Queen seconds it. It is now on the floor. Is there a discussion? Is there a discussion on the motion?
Can you repeat the motion?
The motion is for the Board of Education to approve the removal of SROs from the school system, the termination of all contracts with police departments involving SROs.
Just point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Please, Mr. Vice Chair.
I think that is one part of the motion that you just stated, but there are two other parts
Okay.
that are in the report. The mental health services and also requesting that the superintendent come back with the plan to ensure that we meet all the requirements in the Maryland Safe to Learn Act. So it's all three of those elements from the original budget committee that
Okay.
is up
And
now.
I agree with Mr. Burrow's interpretation of the motion. Any further discussion?
A point of clarification, is there any interest in separating those three, or is it still just off of one?
It's all one motion.
Another motion, I guess, afterwards.
Yeah.
We can take them separately and separate if you'd like.
I just want to make sure that it's in Robert's Rules of Order, and if there's any other thing that needs to be done in order to do that, just for clarification, Mr. Burrow.
A motion is in order. Mr. Murray, you made the original motion. If you want to modify it, you may do so.
Take one at a time.
Yeah, we can take those issues one at a time if the board would like.
We will then, with the permission of Mr. Murray, we will vote on the SROs, then we'll vote on the second two. And if those fail, or any one of them, we will then deal with the committee's report to the board. Any discussion on the first motion, which is to authorize the removal of the SROs? Hearing no discussion, Mr. Murray.
Thanks. Sorry, I thought you saw my hand raised. Colleagues, I just wanted to speak in favor of the exact same motion and sentiment that we brought up back in the spring. I know this board sought to table the removal of armed police officers from our school system to get more time to study, to look at the issue. I know that I've certainly taken that time to reflect on it myself, and have heard from the protests and rallies held around our county about the dire need to act now to ensure that our students are able to learn in safe environments, and that doesn't require armed police officers to do so. And so I would urge all of my colleagues tonight, hopefully you have taken this time as well to review the research that we have gotten from a variety of groups about the many harmful effects on our students that having armed police officers can and has had. And so I would ask for your vote tonight in support of removing armed police officers from our schools.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Ms. Somad.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. I just wanted to echo some of Mr. Murray's points here. We're talking about a very specific issue with this motion. Should armed police officers be in our schools, yes or no? And it's my belief that we need to make a decision on that, because that's what we were elected and appointed to do, to be leaders that make decisions. And just one big thing about the SROs is that the armed police officers that are SROs are not beholden to our PGCPS system or our board. As a board, we have no control over the armed officers that patrol our schools. We don't train, we don't do any extensive training with them like we do with security services. They aren't selected or recruited by us. And it's because that they report to the police departments. And so what we do know is that the largest law enforcement department that has armed police officers in our schools is the Prince George's Police Department, which is a troubled department that has had issues and cases of discrimination, as you can see from the Baltimore Sun articles that has come out. And so I just want to make it very clear that we need to take into account that this is a very specific issue. We have the power to make a change now. I urge us to make a change now. And I hope that the data that you all have been researching and thinking about yields itself to a positive vote for this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samaj. Ms. Queen, and then Mr. Thomas.
Hi, yes, Dr. Thornton, thank you for recognizing me. I just want to say, you guys, I've been listening to a lot of people talk about SROs in the school system, and it seems like even our youth are speaking out from it, and I've heard a lot of the students talk out about their concerns. I know I've heard people say some people have positive role models and they talk to someone, but that's still a small percentage of compared to the ones who I'm hearing the other stories. SROs in school system, to many, has made it seem like Prince George's County has a school to prison pipeline, and we have to change the narrative of our school system. I stated before at our budget meeting, when I graduated in 1980, we didn't have SROs, we didn't even have police like this in the school system. We had fights, we had issues, we had kids that came to school with knives. It was no difference, but we didn't have the policing there. I think we are changing the narrative, and we're making people feel like that our schools are a school to prison pipeline. We are here to educate and to teach these kids, and a lot of them, they are underage when you think about it. And I just believe that having the police in the schools is not a good idea, especially the SROs right at this time. We can use our police officers that we have. We can use them in the community right outside. We can use them a different way. They can be there if we needed them. If we hear about a fight or something going on, then we can have them on ground, for something that we hear, because, you hear the rumor. As a parent who have raised 21 kids, I knew every time it was going to be a fight at Central High School when something was going down at Walker Mill, because the kids talk about it and they share it with someone in the community, and then you call the school or you tell or you let someone else know. Or sometimes the kids told back in the days when they had peer mediation. So it's not like that we don't know about when something is going on. And when we know, we can have them officers on the schools for that certain day, but we don't have to have them there every day. Another thing I wanted to add is we did a survey. And we had people, they send in and they wrote and they told their feelings. And as elected leaders, if we listen to the surveys, majority of the people were saying, get rid of the SROs. So I think as leaders, and if we're going to have a democratic society, we need to make a choice and realize that it's not what we want or we preference, but we need to represent the people. And what I heard one of my colleagues said that, it affects them and their family members, but it affects me even more. Not only do I have a daughter that works in the school system, I have 7 cousins who are teachers. I have a lot of my family members who are janitors in the school system. I have 12 grandchildren that go to Prince George's County Public Schools. So it's affecting my family even a whole lot more. I have a lot of cousins and family members that go to the schools. So yes, and am I worried? No, because we have a higher belief, and I know that our kids are protected. So I just want to say it's no longer about what we want, but we are elected to listen to the people and represent the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Queen. Mr. Thomas.
Thanks. I just want to echo some of the comments made by my colleagues. I think I don't want to repeat anything that's been said because I think that's valuable. I want to make it clear first and just say that I will be voting in support of this proposal to remove armed officers from our buildings. And I really just wanted to use this moment as an opportunity to encourage colleagues who are feeling, who don't agree with this. This is an opportunity for the public to hear us publicly engage about our opinions on this matter. And so I know, I'm speaking out in favor and in support. I know that colleagues wanted time over these past several months to be able to consult with your constituents, and to be able to communicate with different individuals and review the data for yourselves. And so if that time, if during these past several months, we have all done that, I would love to actually hear from anyone who is actually against this proposal. But I understand that this is all our choice as to whether we want to speak up. And so no one is, of course, forced to do that. But I invite you, if you are not in support of this proposal, to please share as to why that could be.
Thank you, my colleague. Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. I appreciate your sentiment, Brother Thomas. My hand was up for a while now, but definitely appreciate that. I also appreciate Ms. Queen's comments about your connection to the school system. Many of us are connected. I know some of us have siblings in the system. Some of us have spouses, not only mine, but others. And so I appreciate that. I think what Mr. Murray mentioned, the time we spent since it was tabled was spent, I believe, rather productively by many of us. I spent a lot of time in my professional life gathering other information from around the country about the best decision for our school system based on data and evidence. At the same time, our county is going through a process, a reform task force that's really studying this on a Prince George's County specific basis. They're still doing that work. That work will be done until October 30th. To other point, the idea of the people speaking, listening to the people, incredibly important. But at the time of this is tabled, there was a lot of division in the county. There were, you have one union, particularly of our school leaders, saying we want support for our SROs. We have another union saying remove. We had politicians from the same communities supporting and opposing it. And so there was no clear consensus. I think for me, what the consensus is within, as I'm looking at it, is having the best information we have and using the time we have. I think Miss Queen mentioned sort of my personal connection and others' personal connection, but we also know my children and my wife are not in schools right now because of remote learning. And so the timing that we have, the additional time we have to make a decision that's informed, that's based on consultation with the police department, with the state's attorney's office, with community partners who are on that task force, information that I think will be incredibly important to make an informed decision about something that will have an impact on our safety. I don't want to regret having made a decision without that information. I think also just understanding the role of SROs and people's views of armed police officers walking down the hallways and policing our schools versus the reality, which is many of them don't come on campus unless they're called, or they're sitting out front, or they move from school to school. The realities are different. Having information about what that looks like on a case-by-case basis is incredibly important. But I think it's important that we are informed. I think this task force, which is composed of members of our community from all walks of life, will help us get more information about this and will help us defend to the communities that oppose whatever decisions we make, whether for or against, that we made a decision that was informed and not rushed, especially when we don't have students and staff in the building right now or not directly being impacted by this and may not be impacted for a very long time. So thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing more from our community and really valuing the support we have for this task force report on police commission that was put together, well-informed, inclusive, data-driven, and in good use of time that we have right now in view of the COVID crisis. Thank you very much.
Mr. Valentine, thank you. Mr. Swan?
I'm fine. I withdraw.
Thank you. Thank you. Miss Jackson?
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. I'm gonna be honest with you. In regards to student solicitation of input regarding SROs in schools, when the resolution was originally brought to the table in June, I didn't think that due diligence was done. I think that, as alluded to though, that over the course of the summer and within these past couple of months, that in a large sense that due diligence has been done. I think we've all spent our time fairly productively when it comes to examining the issue of SROs in our schools. And I'll say this, in regards to students, I can tell you, just as it is in the community, there is no clear consensus on how students feel regarding police in schools. You will not find it, and you will not get one. However, I will say to you, as we all like to throw out how we have skin in the game, there's a certain feeling that's invoked when you walk up to your school in the morning and you see a police car sitting out front of your building. There's a certain feeling that's invoked when you walk into your building and you're greeted by your principal and your school administrator and your school faculty, and you also see them, accompanied by a armed law enforcement officer equipped with vests and all. I say this to say that we have the numbers in front of us. We've heard community feedback. I think that we're doing a disservice by continuously pushing back this issue, waiting for the police reform task force to come out with a report, when we clearly have markers and indicators that we can look towards regarding the state of policing in our county. As already alluded to, and I don't mean to reiterate some of the things already stated, but we have ongoing lawsuits by former and current Black and Latino officers waged against our own police department. We have allegations of discriminatory promotional practices within our department. We have reports being dropped of disproportionate use of force allegations against our Black and Brown and Latino citizens in this county. When we think about what a safe and equitable public school environment looks like, armed law enforcement officers do not come into mind. Security, yes. Armed law enforcement personnel, no. and so I hope you all kind of take this into consideration when we talk about, again, what a safe and equitable public school environment looks like. Thank
Thank you, Ms. Jackson, for your comments. Mr. Burrows?
I second everything that Ms. Jackson just said, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, I mean, I could not have said it any better than what our student board member just said. The only point that I wanted to raise on this first bullet is that Prince George's County Public Schools will still have a strong security department where we spend over $17 million. And I wanted to note that we do not have SROs in all of our schools, and yet we still adequately cover our buildings that meet the state legal requirement. So I think it's very important to note that we are legally mandated to have adequate coverage, and we do that in so many of our buildings without having an SRO present. I want to echo some of the other sentiments around having an outside department so engaged in our buildings. You know, I trust Dr. Golson. I trust this Board of Education. I trust that if something happened regarding a use of force incident or, you know, I trust that we will train and do right by our students. I don't have that same feeling toward outside departments, to be quite candid. And so I know that we have a lot of improvement that we need to do as it relates to security services and the arrests via our ICs. I do not believe that we need to continue to have armed police in our schools that are not accountable to any of us, that interact with our students on a daily basis. And I'm confident that we already have adequate law enforcement coverage at so many of our schools without SROs. So I just wanted to raise those 2 points, that number one, we still have $17 million worth of security in our schools. And B, I think it's important that the individuals that we have interacting with our students on a day in and day out basis are accountable to the Prince George's County School Board, that are trained by us, that are selected by us. You know, it makes no sense to me that a captain in the Prince George's County Police Department can just assign at whim officers to our schools. I mean, do we know their personnel files? Do we know what they've done out on the street? You know, we have no clue in some cases who these individuals are. So I'll just leave my comments there for this first round.
Thank you, Mr. Browse. Any other comments from board members? Ms. Queen for 3 minutes.
Yes, well, it didn't even take 3 minutes, Dr. Thornton. I also just want to remind you guys that since I've learned this, since I've been on the board, Prince George's County Public Schools have no money. We don't make money, and most of our money from the come from the county and the state. And when we find out that this county pays for the SROs, that money could be invested others. That's taxpayer dollars that can be invested in other things. And they keep wanting to tax the taxpayers, which are us. That money could actually, maybe we could use for more mental health, more counseling. Maybe it could use for how they want the taxes on our houses, but it could be used for other things. So our taxpayers are looking at that also, because it's money that could be invested and used for other things in our school system. So I just want to remind you, it's not nothing we pay for, but it is our taxpayer dollars that really could be used for other things.
Thank you, Ms. Queen. I would let me put a timer on my comments because I wanted to make sure that I don't go over 5 minutes in my comments. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. I want to cover a couple of things that I didn't in my first round. First of which is that the county work group that is being composed, that I think is a really positive step for policing generally in the county, they have the scope of the entire county and everything that goes on outside of the schools to focus on. So that group is not tasked with whether there should be armed police officers in schools, and we shouldn't wait nor look to that group to tell our school board what is right to do for our students. Secondly, I just wanted to point to some of the data that probably all of you hopefully have seen by now, because some of the data is so jarring that we know that these numbers are not going to change in a meaningful enough way for us to need to wait another day to do the right thing. The fact that 55% of Prince George's County Public School students are Black, but 86% of the students arrested in our school district are Black tells us alone it's time to act now. We don't need to wait another year. We don't need another data point. These are things that have been going on for a long time, and it's up to us tonight to correct that. And the last piece of data I'd like to point to as a special education teacher is that our students with disability population in the school system is around 11%, but they make up 1 in 4, 25% of our school-based arrests. Do we think that students who have a disability deserve and should be being arrested at a rate nearly double of which they make up in the school district, when we know that what they actually need is more special education teachers? What they actually need is behavioral intervention. What they actually need is counseling from trained school psychologists. And if we want to serve our students, it's done by people who went to school, have taken classes, and have signed up every day to serve students. They didn't go through police training. They went through teacher and other relevant trainings that matter for working with students. So colleagues, I would ask you to vote yes tonight to terminate armed police officers in Prince George's County Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Valentine, and then Ms. Ahmed.
Well, I actually had a question for Dr. Golson. Is that appropriate to do that now, Dr. Thornton?
Yeah, you can ask whatever, yes.
Okay, Dr. Golson, I just want to get clarity. There was a number, $17 million for security, which is, for those who are listening, a very high number. And put in context for the size of our school district and for the needs and the size of our schools. I often get emails from parents, from administrators saying they could use an extra security guard. They could use more coverage. There were incidents where they could use, more support. Can you talk to the state of security in our schools, but also necessarily how do SROs interact with our schools? The understanding that they are many times on call, and so you have an interaction with the security guard first, and an administrator, and the administrator calls. And so, can you talk about where SROs fit into our security of our building? Are they the first resort, or are they the last resort? Thank you.
So we have 3 layers of security. First, we have SROs, and we have a total of 32 school resource officers that are distributed amongst our high schools. Then we have sergeants and investigative counselors that are in our middle and high schools, and those are typically retired police officers. And then we have another layer, which are security assistants. And once again, those security assistants are at the middle and high school level. We don't have any security specifically assigned to elementary schools, though if something happens, we do send some of that security staff over to assist if need be.
Thank you. Ms. Ahmed.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. I just wanted to take Mr. Murray's statement to the next level, and it kind of speaks to Ms. Jackson's point about systems and practices, and that is that the data shows that police in schools cause more harm than just arrests. I want to make that clear. The Maryland Commission on the School to Prison Pipeline discussed how the presence of SROs leaves students feeling criminalized. And data from numerous studies show that the presence of SROs lead to higher retribution for conduct that is part of typical adolescent behavior. So this is more about just the raw number of arrests. This is about creating a culture that centers learning and development, and it's not preparing students for institutionalization. So I wanted to make that very clear.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. And Ms. Jackson for 3 minutes.
I think to add on to that point, I think it's definitely an issue much broader than arrest, right? It does speak to the notion of culture in our school cultures. And I think we wholly understand that by the mere fact that we refer to these officers not as police in schools or cops in schools, but we call them SROs. We know that these are officers with guns in schools, but we throw a name on them for the sake of connotation and imagery. We wholly understand the fact that it's not the impact, the residual impact this has outside of arrest. And when we talk about the interaction between SROs and students, you have a lot of SROs who are utilized in ways which they're not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be the first line of interaction when, there's a problem, but you have SROs being used as this sort of menacing presence in a lot of cases, right? For a lot of things such as like minor disruptions, SROs being utilized as presences in hall sweeps, in minor altercations, or a student getting loud in class. There's scenarios like these which happen all the time in school, whether or not we may or may not hear about it. And I think that's important to note.
Colleagues, since this discussion has come up, I would say this, you know, as a father of 2 graduates of the school system and a grandfather of 3 currently enrolled school systems, I obviously have no interest in armed police officers in public schools in any regard. I chaired the first Citizens Against Police Brutality group in Prince George's County. So I want to kind of lay that out as a point of departure for me. I have no interest in armed police officers in our schools. I also believe you'll remember that when this issue first came up back in July, there was no involvement by the larger community with this question. And that was very unfortunate for our school system and for the Board of Education and for our children. There was no discussion. There was no task force. There was no discussion by legislators and delegates and all of that. And when the issue was introduced by Mr. Murray and by Ms. Ahmed and others, it then excited involvement from the broader community, which is what the only thing I've ever asked for is that we get to the point where we are now. We are leading on this question. It is not an attempt to delay. It's an attempt to say, when you make a decision like this, it is not just the Board of Education. When our children come to us with issues that result in policing, those are community expressions. Those are cultural expressions. Those are family expressions. And the Board of Education is not the only one responsible for that. So I'm excited to see the Police Reform Task Force, the county executive, the county council, the advocates who are advocates against police brutality, Black Lives Matter, are on that. They are responding to the energy coming from this board. Now there is a state legislative SRO task force responding to the energy coming from this board. Your OBAFA committee, I had not seen the data that I have now seen regarding what actually takes place. I can state certain kinds of things that I feel, but for the first time, we have data and information. And so I think, regardless of how this vote comes out, let us understand what we have initiated on behalf of the people of Prince George County. I get emails, as you've seen them, because I share them with you, from all kinds of advocacy groups across the nation about our school system and SROs. We have started a debate about this question, and we should not prematurely stop it. We should continue to receive information from our public. We should get the data, and we should participate in the larger, what I call, accountability system for this issue. We are not the only one who's accountable for this. So I would advocate, I'm not going to vote for this particular motion, but I am going to vote for us to continue what we're doing, and that is to advance information gathering, the consensus building around this question, and make a decision which I hope in the end will allow the people of Prince George's County not to need what Baltimore City has, by the way. I didn't realize that Baltimore City has an armed police department within its school system, a whole police department. You see, and no one wants that, okay? And no one is yelling and shouting about it. I saw something from a Ravens football player about SROs in Prince George's County, and the Baltimore City school system has an armed police department, a whole department. So as I said, I'll respect as a board member, my time's up, whatever decision we make, but I hope we will move forward to continue to develop the input and make a decision that's in the interest of our children. I'll recognize Mr. Wallace and then Mr. Swan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank, I think it was Mr. Thomas who had invited board members with a diverse understanding of this initiative and this endeavor to speak. Colleagues, when these 2 proposals first came before us late last year, as chair of the budget committee, I voted in favor of 2 of them, and I had abstained on this particular motion because I did not have enough information. And since then, I had not only sent out community surveys, but as you all have received, countless emails, text messages, social media posts, flyers. And I think it's right that we recognize the purposeful emotion behind this initiative that some deem as very unhealthy and some deem as necessary. What I do not want us to do is to get into a back and forth on who is representing the people and who is not representing the people. Because as a elected member, if I were to just go with what the people in my District 7 community survey said, the over 600 people that responded, 78% of them will want me to vote against this motion. But sometimes you have to go against the grain, you have to go against what your community believes because you ultimately want to be on the right side of history. That was true centuries ago. It's true in a lot of things that public policy and governmental officials must do. I am very much willing to hear more from my colleagues tonight, not kicking the can down the road as it has already been kicked. My question in this first round is to the administration, is to Dr. Golson, or perhaps it is to the OBAFA chair, Ms. Williams. I caught the tail end of the committee meeting earlier this week in the presentation that was put before the committee. And I know that Mr. Murray spoke about some numbers that have been highlighted in many articles and letters from nonprofits from Maryland, New York, all around the nation. But I see here on slide 14 that in the last school year, SROs, and maybe I have this wrong, maybe I have the context wrong, that SROs had 32 arrests. Am I understanding that correctly?
Ms. Williams,
you're absolutely correct. 32.
So there have been 32 arrests over an entire 180-day school year by SROs, separate from Prince George's County Public School System, security assistants and corporals and captains that have arrest powers as well. So
just to clarify that, Mr. Wallace, out of the 204 arrests, there were only 32 performed by SROs. The others were performed in the majority by our own staff people.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and I hate to repeat myself, but I want to make sure that it's clear for me and the public. Out of our 200 plus schools in our 180-day school year, last year there were 204 arrests total.
No,
go ahead, Dr. Golson.
Vice Chair needs to say, remember our school year was cut in March.
Ms. Queen, please, I've not recognized you. Dr. Golson,
No, thank you so much, Ms. Queen. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So
just to be clear,
up until the departure, there were 204 arrests.
And 32 performed.
32 of them were from SROs, armed police officers.
Correct.
And so my question is to Mr. Murray, and perhaps I didn't see it in the articles. There have been so many in the last 3 hours. Of that percentage that you talked about, the 80% or so, that is very disproportionate for African-American students. Is that statistic from the SRO 32 arrests, or is it from the 204?
So that's in total.
It's in, okay, so
that's in total to my understanding, but I think it's also important to, as you said, contextualize that A, the school year ended early, and B, to a lot of what Ms. Ahmed and Ms. Jackson touched on, also doesn't touch on the other effects of just having, the negative effects of having the presence of those officers, whether or not they are arresting students.
No, I absolutely hear that, and I thank both Ms. Jackson and Ms. Ahmed.
Dr. Golson?
Yes, sorry, I have to interject just because I want to make sure you all get the data points correct. There were a total of 280 arrests, and those arrests are just charges, not necessarily full incarceration. So we have partnerships with several offices, State's Attorney's Office, several juvenile deterrent programs so that students don't actually get those actual charges. But there were out of the 280, there were 204 that were done by Safety and Security Services, 44 that were done by law enforcement specialty units, and then 32 that were from our SROs. So I just want to make sure you all get the data correct if you're going to quote it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Swan?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Thornton. I certainly want to thank all my colleagues for the comments. I think this is a very important topic as a product of Prince George's County Public Schools myself with 2 sons in Prince George's County. This subject is very, very sensitive to me. And I really do share your thoughts, Dr. Thornton. But when this was first brought up, I thought there was going to be a broader public outreach. I too have received a lot of information, just like Mr. Wallace from District 4 about how folks are feeling about this. I want to know, did that happen? Did it not happen? What was the results of that? I didn't see any of that. I also would like to know, Dr. Golston, you know, I think you're a phenomenal leader. We all think you're a phenomenal leader. The security and safety of our schools, you know, stops with you, ends with you, as well as our culture. I was hoping to get a report from you or a recommendation from your office and team about where you see SROs in the building. I would love to get that perspective before we make a decision that may very well affect how you can do your job and those in charge of our buildings.
So the report that the OBAFA committee received is our data from our school system. So anything that any committee that the Board of Education sees, I have reviewed, and that is data that I have reviewed as well. So what you see is from administration. I'm a reflection of administration, and what you have before you are facts as it relates to our school resource officers. I am in concurrence that what we must do, because those school resource officers are purchased through county government funds. County government has a robust SRO committee that is also a committee that is looking at law enforcement for the county and has a subcommittee that is looking at SROs. And so what I ask us to do, because we are great partners with our county council and our county executive, is that we allow that committee to do their due diligence. We still continue to collect data. We issue a survey, which we did not do, because my focus was really on the reopening of school and determining how our students would begin school on August 31st and keeping them safe. And so my recommendation is such that we continue to receive feedback, allow the county government to issue their report. In conjunction with their report, we look at all of our facts and then make a determining decision. As stated before, our students are not in school right now. They will not be until it is safe to do so. I continue to monitor COVID-19 numbers, and every day they seem to increase, unfortunately.
Thank you, Dr. Golston.
And just, can I have a point of clarification, Dr. Thornton?
Yes.
So we are not voting on that recommendation. Like we're not even discussing the recommendation.
What we're doing now is voting on the motion as a second reader from the July 11th meeting. If that motion succeeds, it succeeds. If it does not, we'll go back to the OBAFA committee report, which includes the recommendation from Dr. Golston. Mr. Wallace, you had 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, again. Circling back, and I want to thank our CEO for introducing those facts. I know that we all have spoken about the training that may not happen with armed police officers in schools or SROs, however we want to label them tonight. And I know we talk about the training for our security staff, who, in my humble opinion, in my experience, do a very good job. But just these numbers, what I'm seeing here, what I'm hearing tonight, what I viewed at the meeting of the committee on Monday, it seems as though the greater need is internal. And perhaps it's just proximity to our students. You know, we have a lot more security assistants in our schools than one armed SRO in our buildings. Perhaps we need to look internally, more so than completely sever a relationship with one of our county's largest, but as Ms. Amos said, troubling agencies. And I know that there will be new leadership at the helm for our police department. But I want to make this very final point, and it's something that I believe in personally, politically, is that our police department in our county, just like our public school system in our county, can do a better job all the way around. We all have loved ones in the school system, and some of us, like me, have loved ones in our police department. My cousin, we call him the police's police. He's on our special operations division, or what is commonly known as SWAT. So when the police need help, they call him. Over the summer, I spent a lot of time talking to him about this issue. He is a High Point High School graduate, University of Maryland College Park graduate. He's Prince George's County through and through. And he believes, just like I believe, in community policing. He believes, like I believe, in community schools. And for many of us, I believe all of us on this board, see schools as the centers and hubs of our community. And it is my belief in this motion, in this particular motion, that we are stretching the gap between community policing and community schools even further by removing one department from another. We're removing police, armed police, from our public school system. And if we do see schools as the hub of our community, and if we do believe in community policing, I do not believe that this helps to bridge that gap, but to further expand upon it. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. And I think now if we could move to a vote, and then we can go to the second two items. Ms. Ellis, would you please call the roll? Colleagues, the vote is on the motion to authorize the removal of SROs from our school system. Ms. Ellis, please call the roll.
Yes. Mrs. Ahmed,
Aye.
Ms. Boozer Strother,
No.
Mr. Burrows,
Aye.
Ms. Jackson,
Aye.
And we'll have to return to whether or not Ms. Jackson has the authority to vote on
I
a
don't think
personnel item. I'll record it as aye, but then we'll have to look at whether she has the right to do it. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Montero,
No.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mrs. Queen,
Double I.
Mrs. Shepherd,
No.
Mr. Swan,
No.
Mr. Thomas.
Aye.
I didn't hear. Mr. Thomas,
Aye.
Mr. Valentine,
Nay.
Mr. Wallace,
No.
Mrs. Williams,
No.
Dr. Thornton,
No. Colleagues, the vote is 8 noes and
And
six yes, and the motion fails. The second motion, Ms. Queen and Mr. Burrows, was what?
Dr. Thornton, I think it's probably going to be most appropriate just to go to number 3, because I think number 2 will be covered in the subsequent motion because number
Okay.
1 failed. So
Okay.
we can just go to the mental health supports.
Yes.
Okay. That motion being, Ms. King, what is that motion from? You have the minutes on.
Let's go ahead.
This is Mr. Murray. I can read the motion if you'd like.
Please, and Ms. King, you'll check with Mr. Murray. Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
The motion is that the Board of Education asks the Chief Executive Officer to develop options for the Board of Education to consider regarding adding up to $5 million in operating budget, with those funds being used to increase the amount of social workers, mental health professionals, counselors, with an emphasis on hiring individuals that reflect the demographics of our children, expand restorative justice practices and approaches, and hire additional academic interventionists to target elementary school students that are behind grade level in reading. This motion passed unanimously from the Budget Committee in the spring.
Yeah, I think certainly something that I can support. Any discussion of that motion? Hearing none, Mr. Valentine.
Just a point of clarification. I'm not sure if Mr. Burrows and Mr. Murray, when the motion was brought up, that $5 million figure, is that in any way related to the amount the county pays in SROs at all, just for clarification?
No.
How much is that amount from the county? I just wanted to make sure that the impression, at least not from you, but from the public, that maybe we thought that if we cut the SROs, that the money we used to cut could go towards this, but understanding later that many people found out later that actually that money was not already in our budget and would actually add $5 million to the budget. I just wanted clarity. So that was not your intention. This was an additional $5 million on top of everything else, sir?
Absolutely. And when I'm recognized by the chair, I'll go into a full explanation of this.
No, I appreciate your clarification. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So that does clarify the point that this would be an additional $5 million that Dr. Golson would have to find, and the board would have to find.
For what year?
The motion does not indicate the year, and I think you're seeking a necessary clarification.
It does.
Just a point of clarification, in the motion, it says fiscal year 2021 operating budget.
Okay. All right. So let's be clear, Mr. Murray, in terms of the motion and the seconder of the motion. And if you want to modify the motion, we can. At this point, what we are voting on is a $5 million adjustment to the current budget that we are in. That's what the motion is. If you want to modify that, Mr. Murray, you can do that.
If I can.
Please, Mr. Burrows. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Williams and then Mr. Burrows. Ms. Williams?
I was just wondering, can we legally do that since the budget has already been approved and enacted?
Yeah, no. If I may, Mr. Chair, I can clear this up pretty quickly.
Please.
So colleagues, when Mr. Murray first introduced the resolution, this was back in the Budget Committee on June 11th. And the committee worked to produce consensus where we could. And so one of the elements of that consensus proposal was to ask the superintendent to bring back to the board a plan to increase mental health services by $5 million. Well, at the June 11th meeting, this board voted to table the entire package to September. We needed to approve our budget by June 30th. And by tabling that entire package to September, we never got an opportunity to vote to include these resources in this current budget. And all this, in the committee, the initial motion was to increase the mental health services by $5 million. In order to get a unanimous vote, we watered it down so much to simply say, ask the superintendent to bring back a plan for how we would increase mental health services and social workers by $5 million. If it would have passed on June 11th, the superintendent would have then come back right before the final budget vote, and we would have had that information to make a determination about that amendment for the FY21 budget. But it was tabled to September. So here we are now, and there's no way to do this. And so I'll ask, the sponsor as a friendly amendment, if we can just make it the 2022 budget. And I would, so that is just me clarifying the issue, but I do want to argue the issue on behalf of the issue. And here's what I'll say. I'll say that, colleagues, we have a lot of students in absolute crisis at home because of the coronavirus. Unemployment in our county is up. We have a lot of young people who do not have stable housing at this time. Food insecurity is real. Domestic violence is also up in the county. And so now more than ever, we needed these mental health services to be increased. And in this budget that we're working on now for next year, we need an increase in mental health services. And so it is unfortunate that it was tabled and we could not do this on the June 11th meeting, but I think the motion could simply read to have the superintendent create a plan to increase those mental health services by $5 million that the budget committee and the full board can consider prior to the next budget vote. I think it's the best way to proceed at this point.
Mr. Vice Chair, I fully support what you just said in terms of the FY22 budget, asking Dr. Golson to try to increase in her proposal to the board to increase mental health budgeting, student support services in that regard by $5 million. I think that's a reasonable request. But what I will say though, is that recall that when the board was about to consider its budget, We had to cut 35, this is to the people of Prince George County. We had to cut $35 million from our budget at the time period that you're talking about. This is what's so frustrating to me as a board chair. We were talking about adding 5 million while we were cutting 35 million from the children of Prince George County. Part of that 35 million was the 5 million. Now, come January, everybody knows that this Board of Education is going to be hit mightily, physically. So let's not play with, I'm not saying anybody's playing, but we have a fiscal crisis that's coming, that's upon our school system. And we can say no one opposes mental health services for our babies, no one. But to make promises that we can, and we're cutting $35 million from our system, and in January, we're probably going to have to cut millions of dollars from our system. So let's be, and that's why I'm glad the motion, hopefully, Mr. Murray, you'll accept it, that we look to FY22, when hopefully things will settle down, COVID, the budget cuts that's coming, dramatic cuts, and then Dr. Golson presents the budget to us, will include mental health services increase. And hopefully we'll be able to fund it. Because if not, it's going to be a major train wreck for us, and we shouldn't over-make promises to the people that we cannot keep. Mr. Murray, I'm assuming that you are accepting the modification, which is FY22.
Yes, I accept.
Very good. So colleagues, the motion on the floor as modified is now recognized Ms. Boozer-Strother, Mr. Valentine, is to ask Dr. Golson as a part of her FY22 proposal coming out of the budget committee. Ms. Williams will obviously get into this, that we will ask her to try and add at least $5 million for mental health services for the FY22 proposal, but we'll get into that in the budget committee. Ms. Boozer-Strother and then Mr. Valentine.
Thank you so much, Chair and colleagues. And, you know, I just want to say that this is a point where the board is so unified. In fact, 2 years ago, we even came together for even a larger sum of funds adjustment to a budget for mental health services and social workers. But we also had to face the reality that what we were working towards is funding. And if we lose our sights, and I know I say this almost every meeting, if we lose our sights on the passage of the blueprint for Maryland's future, where these funds are coming from, this will be even more difficult for our children. So I hope that after this evening, we could turn towards what we need to get done is the override of Governor Hogan's veto, because that is funding our 45 and now growing social workers, community schools, that is funding the 45 mental health service providers in our schools and growing for year 2. But that was a 2-year down payment on this plan. And after that, if we do not pass this, that funding will not be there. And so I hope that we could continue to inform our constituents where the true battle is. The battle is for a fully funded and equitable school system. And that is the state of Maryland's responsibility. So I appreciate Mr. Murray's proposal. The timing was unfortunate, but I do believe this is where we are unified, and this Board of Education can continue to go to Annapolis and lead on this and ensure final passage. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague. Mr. Valentine, and then hopefully we can vote. Mr. Valentine.
Just a point of clarification. Is this a vote to ask the CEO to come back with a plan, or a vote to direct her to increase the budget by $5 million for this?
The motion is to ask the CEO to come back with a plan which would be reflected in her FY22 budget proposal.
Thank you, sir.
And we will ask Ms. Williams and Ms. Queen in the budget committee to work with Dr. Golson in that regard. Mr. Swan and Ms. Queen, and then hopefully we can vote.
I got a couple questions. One, did I hear that the language is up to 5 million and not just 5 million?
Yes, it's on board docs.
Okay. And Dr. Golson, from your perspective of what FY22 looks like, could you give the board any sense of where we stand from a budget perspective?
So if we had to cut 35 million last year, we still are in a pandemic. We're going to have to cut even more this school year. So I'll have to cut for FY22. So I'll have to cut something to increase by 5 million.
Gotcha. I would like to propose a friendly amendment that we just say $5 million. If the board is going to take a position to increase mental health and stand to support mental health, and with all the comments that have been said, why would we mince words and say up to a number? If we want 5 million and that's the message that we want, or we want to see in the plan, then let's be clear with that. I don't know, Mr. Murray, how do you feel about that?
I'm going to reject that and stick to the language that the budget committee came up with. Holding
Thank you, Mr. Murray. You rejected it. Thank you very much. Dr. Golson and then Ms. Queen.
I just want to make a note that when I was selected for the position, I made it very clear that over the next 4 years, I would make sure that we increase mental health support so that we would have supports in every last one of our schools. So the passing of this is only consistent with what I'd already said we would do over the next 4 years. But I want to be very clear that in terms of our budget, we're going to probably be in a worse situation than we were at the end of the school year. We're going to have to give something up in order to continue down this route. But well-planned and well-ready to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Queen and Mr. Montero, and then we'll vote.
Okay, I just want to say that you guys, even as a board and to our CEO, and I hope our CFO is listening, that we have to realize it's a season and a reason for everything. I said this at our budget committee meeting, and that we would unfortunately given the gift of COVID. Through the gift of COVID, it is a lot of positive grants out here, you guys. And some of the grants is mental health grants, okay? And as a board, we need to direct our CEO and our CFO to go out there and get that money, okay? It is needed for our children. It's there. The states and the county and the government knows that the online learning is causing a lot of mental issues in people's households. Not just the online learning, and we've heard through a state that wives and husbands has been divorced, issues going on in people's households. So mental health is a big issue. Let's go out there and get that money. I believe that the 5 million is going to be there. I believe that some of the things that we may thought that we're going to have to cut, we may not have to cut. Some of the things, yes, we may still need the money, but we got to speak what we want in life, and we got to stop being negative, thinking that we may not get it or it's going to be worse. I'm thinking positive. I'm a positive person. We're going to get that money, and we're going to get a lot more for next year.
Thank you, Ms. Queen. Mr. Montero, and then we will vote.
I just wanted to weigh in, just recognizing what Dr. Goldson shared about the reality of the financial situation, and recognizing everyone on this board supports additional mental health supports for our students, and just starting from that place. And even though I've been out of the federal government for 3 years now, I used to work on school systems at the Justice Department that had issues with students and the security of students in school buildings. I've worked with school systems that have leadership that create a situation where students with mental health issues are not being addressed or supported. One of the most disturbing trends while I was at the Justice Department, in addition to the shootings of people of color, was the shootings of people with mental illness. That's one of the most disturbing trends we're seeing. And because this is such an important issue, I would like to continue to trust Dr. Goldson's leadership in this literal crisis. I think what COVID is doing to K-12 systems and colleges and universities in this country will be studied for decades to come, because everyone's struggling to get this right. She was already leading on this area. We looked at it in the Academic Achievement Committee over the last year. And I want to continue to give her the space she needs to negotiate a very tough budget situation, trusting that her leadership will get us where we need to be. But I'd rather not do a piecemeal approach where I think this is sort of going that way. I'm trying to get where folks want to go, but it's just a different road to get there. So I won't be supporting this resolution.
Thank you. Ms. Ellis, would you please call the roll on the motion?
Yes. Mrs. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Buza-Strother?
Yes.
Mr. Burrows?
Aye.
Mr. Montero?
No.
Mr. Murray?
Aye.
Mrs. Queen?
Aye.
Mrs. Shepherd?
I just want to clarify, it's for her to develop a plan, right? I just want to make sure I understand.
Develop a plan and include in her budget proposal, working with the OBAFA committee, a $5 million enhancement in mental health services.
Yes.
Mr. Swan,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
No.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
To clarify, Dr. Thornton, it's up to $5 million,
No, it's
correct?
5 million.
I thought he didn't accept that.
Yeah, can we
Oh, that's right. He did not
clarify?
accept it. It's up to, right. He did not accept it.
Okay.
Right. It's up to.
He did not accept that. I'm going to say no, only because I want to give Dr. Golson
That's
the
okay. That's okay.
possibility.
No, Miss Williams, please.
No.
Please go on with the roll.
Dr. Thornton,
Yes.
3 noes and 10 yeses.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, for that discussion of that issue. Now, colleagues, we'll proceed now to the OBAFA committee's report, which includes some of this, so hopefully we won't have to go back over our discussion. Ms. Williams, and would you please present the committee's report?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thornton. At the last OBAFA committee held on September 14th, this past Monday, we discussed the use of SROs and school security. We were presented with a very thorough presentation, and I would like to give Dr. Golson the ability to present on that information.
Please, Dr. Golson.
So are we doing the full PowerPoint?
Yes. Or at least you can go through it as you deem appropriate.
Ms. King, if you can pull up the PowerPoint.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We uploaded the PowerPoint, but we did not, in our leadership meeting, we said that we were not going to go through it. Remember?
Dr. Golson, please just summarize. It's not necessary to go through the whole report. Board members have it. So please just speak to it and then we'll proceed.
We don't want to give it, yes, he can give as much information as he'd like, but I think the public should be made aware of the pertinent pieces.
To the public, the PowerPoint regarding SROs is available to the public. Dr. Golson, you may speak to it as you deem appropriate.
So a PowerPoint presentation was presented from our Director of Security Services and our Chief of Operations on Monday of this week to the OBAFA committee. And it is a 17-page document which provides an overview of the history of school resource officers, the year that they started, which began back in the late 1970s. It talks about how we arrived at school resource officers from legislation that was issued in 1988 from President Clinton that looked at the hiring of additional SROs nationwide. We provided information on school shootings nationally from year 2005 to 2018 and the number of deaths that experienced from those mass shootings. We provided the state perspective on school resource officers with the creation of the Maryland Center for School Safety, and then the Maryland Safe to Learn Act of 2018, where that bill requires that high schools have to either have a school resource officer or plans for adequate law enforcement coverage for the upcoming school year. And when it states upcoming school year, that is for this school year and each school year after. This was for the Act of 2018. We then provided the history of school resource officers in Prince George's County Public Schools. And for us, we started with school resource officers in 1998. And the first school resource officer was assigned to Eleanor Roosevelt High School. And then the next school after that was Northwestern High School. We provide an overview of the Memorandum of Understanding as it relates to Prince George's County Public Schools and Prince George's County Police Department and designated municipality. As stated earlier, there is no direct cost to PGCPS for the SROs. Our MOU has expired between Bowie Police, Hyattsville, Greenbelt City Police. And our current one for Prince George's County Police Department expires June 30th, 2022. And we go through with the provisions of the MOU and the duties of the SRO. We also provide in that memorandum of understanding the roles and responsibilities of our principals as it relates in continuing to work with our school resource officers. We found that arrest data, which we have already gone through, that there were 280 arrests, which is a decrease from the previous school year. And I have a broken down of where those arrests were made, that total number of arrests. In the area of 44, about there were 4 arrests in law enforcement specialty units. We did provide an overview of where those came from, where that 44 additional offices that was from. As stated before, the total number of resource officers, there are 28 from Prince George's County Police Department, 2 from Bowie, 1 from Greenbelt, Hyattsville Police Department. And as stated earlier today, the total number of security officers and SROs the total of security personnel in our school system is 66. And then when you add the total SRO, the total of 99, and that's only at the secondary level and not at the elementary level. We provide the breakdown to arrest for the police officers. And then I provide an overview of recommendations for task force, the Prince George's County Police Task Force, and then recommended next steps. And in those next steps, I recommend that we students, parents, and staff to allow their voice to be heard, a structured survey, which we had not done, reduce the arrest powers of our Georges County Public Schools security staff, create a crisis prevention model in partnership with the Department of Social Services, and provide additional funding for quality after school programs for students and families in targeted communities, and continue to increase mental health support provided to students over the next 3 years. That is a summary of the presentation that was presented to the OBAFA Committee Monday.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, you may proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Golson. I thought that the information that was presented was very much enlightening. And I think that your next steps are in line with what I think will give will make a long-term effect on how our students perceive security in our school systems and getting them the support that they need. And so the next step, really, in order for us to serve them properly, is to get the survey and look at our internal security staff and how we operate, create that crisis prevention program, and continue to increase the mental health support. And so our recommendation to the board at this time is to receive Dr. Golson's report. And let me read it exactly from the recommendation. The recommendation is to receive the CEO's report, instruct the CEO to continue receiving information from parents, staff, and community leaders, including the results of the County Police Reform Task Force, which will be completed on or before October 30th, 2020. Instruct the CEO to bring a report and recommendation before the board on or before January 8th regarding the status of SROs in the school system and any additional related recommendations regarding school security and student support services based on the research and findings.
Thank
So
you,
that
Ms.
is the motion I have on the table.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. That's the report. It doesn't need a second coming from a committee. Hopefully we've debated this issue, colleagues, but if there's any additional comments, please, I'll recognize you, and then we'll try to move on with the vote. Mr. Matt, and then Mr. Wallace.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Thornton. Colleagues, I have to be blunt. I feel like some of y'all are waiting for a blessing, like either a blessing from the task force, a blessing from the county council, a blessing from the county executive. I don't think that a blessing will come. This is an issue where I'm thinking, if we make the decision now versus if we make the decision 6 months from now, what could we expect to be different? And the data is there. there was a statewide commission on the school to prison pipeline. We got info and recommendations from security services. We put out a survey whose results were presented to the budget committee, and the majority of people said to remove SROs. So I don't know what more is needed to make a decision. I understand that we made the vote already, but I feel strongly that if folks are waiting for a blessing from someone, I don't think it's going to come. So we have to like really sit down and buckle down on what is you want and what is it that you believe in. And if this vote passes, be ready to make that decision, because it's going to be hard. Or now it's going to be not pushing it off, not waiting for other people to call the shot.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed, and keep in
That's
mind,
all I have to
colleagues.
say.
Thank you, colleague. We've debated whether to remove SRO, so that's not on the table. Mr. Wallace and then Ms. Shepherd, and hopefully we can move to a vote, colleagues, and Mr. Swan. Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question to the committee chair, vice chair, on the actual slide 16 on the actual next steps. Particularly bullet point 3, where it talks about the creation of a crisis prevention model, and then to provide additional funding, right? So we had a debate just a couple minutes ago about funding. And it looks like this funding may come from the county's Department of Social Services. So I can only imagine if the county is not going to fully fund its largest expenditure item, it may not fully fund the Department of Social Services. So was there any discussion in the committee about where that additional funding for quality after school programs was going to come from? And then also, what does that crisis prevention model look like? And I hope it would include the relief given to our school counselors, who in my humble opinion, just in the 5 years I've been on this board, do about 4 or 5, maybe a dozen different jobs. And really redefining the role of a counselor versus a student academic advisor versus a mental health coordinator versus I can go on and on and on.
Already started a diversion program that would allow our students, if they receive a J1, which is a juvenile docket for arrest, that we would work with several entities in our community. We've already identified some of the entities, and they have begun the process of receiving funds to help support the diversion program. Several of those organizations or nonprofit, such as Read Simple, was really helping to assist us in making sure that those students who had discipline issues from school would not necessarily would end up in our juvenile system. And we were doing that in partnership with our state's attorney's office. So in collaboration with several entities, we're working together to create that program for students. That after school piece, where Ms. Queen mentioned the use of grant funds, we have received lots of grant funds, and after school programming is part of it. But let me be clear, with all grants, they all come to an end. And so it is only until those funds run out, and it is literally continuing to use grant funds such as the ones that we received while in COVID to offset that, not using operating money, because I already know that our operating funds are going to be limited.
Thank you. Ms. Shepherd? Ms. Shepherd?
Yes, I'm not sure if I could say my comment, but it was in regards to the SROs and just comment to Ms. Ahmed, but I'm not sure, since we're not having that conversation, if I could say my comment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Boozer-Struther and then Mr. Swan.
Thank you. Mine is just a point of clarification. It is not my understanding that we have surveyed our constituents. When we survey our constituents, we survey based on students, parents, staff, and that survey has not gone out. We have received emails and they were compiled into a document, and I've seen many of those emails. Some are sent people all over the county and they're documented. I have a handful more from my constituents, but my parents and my students in District 3 have not been surveyed. I want to be clear about that. And I've been waiting for that. And I think my constituents are wondering, what I'm waiting for. Well, it's my understanding that we were going to do some deeper research, and that's one point. So I want clarification on that. Two is that the full context of what an SRO does has still not been documented. SROs provide security for external threats, and I see no data on evidence of that. What are the types of external threats they've stopped? So I'm just asking for the data piece on this. Thank you.
Colleagues, we're not going to return to a debate of the motion we've already settled. I'm going to go back to Ms. Williams as chair of the committee. Let's focus our discussion on the committee's report and not re-debate the motion we've already acted on. Ms. Williams, and hopefully we can move this issue, colleagues. Ms. Williams.
Just to be clear, as the committee chair, can you hear me okay? Because my earpiece has died.
No, we can't hear you, Ms. Williams.
We can't hear you.
We cannot hear you.
We can't hear you, Ms. Williams.
Ms. Williams, we can't hear you. While Ms. Williams is correcting, Mr. Swan, did you have a brief comment?
I did. I just want a point of clarification, and actually it was to Ms. Williams, so I don't know. It was about I too have the same sentiments that Ms. Bouza-Struthers just talked about with the survey, and I thought I heard a date. She said it very fast. What was the date that the survey would be out and we would get the results back? Was that October 30th? I heard, and if not, can we put a date to when we say we're going to get this survey out so that the community, our teachers, our staff, and students can make sure their voices are heard in a very statistical significant way.
Absolutely. And so as a part of working with Dr. Golson, we will work to get that survey done and the information returned before she presents her report.
And that would be, and what was the date for her to present the report?
January 8th.
January 8th, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Wait, Dr. Thornton. So as I began to say, as the budget committee chair, our job is to help with developing the operating budget and to give Dr. Golson the ability to investigate and use all of the information she has in order to come up with the best program. That is what we need to allow her to do. I hope that in the budget priority survey that each of the board members were given, that they included mental health as a priority so that she can.
Okay, Mr. Murray, and then hopefully we can vote. Mr. Murray.
Yes. I have to say something.
I'll come to you shortly. Ms. Shepherd, I'll come to you shortly. Mr. Murray.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly touch on something that I haven't talked about yet and just kind of bring to public attention, which is the fact that the tabling, again, of this issue from the Budget Committee, the reason that that is a different outcome from the motion that we moved forward in the Budget Committee in the spring is because I was removed from the Budget Committee without any other reason, frankly, other than my support of removing armed officers from our schools. I was removed from the Budget Committee, and the composition was changed in order to bring forth the recommendation that we saw tonight, which was yet another table. And I just wanted to bring that forward to the public and to my colleagues, how frankly shameful I thought that was, that I was removed for supporting removing armed officers. Thank you.
Thank you, my colleague. And at that point, I will defend my decision as the chair of the board. I removed you from the committee to improve the functioning and operation of the committee. And it has been accomplished. And you don't want me to go into any more details regarding that. I'll call now on Ms. Shepherd.
So this question is, for Dr. Golson. I just want to make sure you said I have not gotten a survey as a parent to see what I think about the SROs and the safety in school.
There have been several references to a survey. I'm not sure what survey people are referencing, but it is not one that is issued by PGCPS.
So, but there will be one, right, that the school system would send out to get the input of the community?
Yes, there will be.
So that other thing that I wanted to ask in regards to that is, what else other than a survey will be provided to ensure that the community who are not highly represented here in the board, in terms of the Latin community, the Middle Eastern community, that they speak Pashto, how we want to make sure that this community is also, if they're not able to complete a survey, they're also, their inputs are being heard. Are we doing town halls? Are we doing groups to ensure that they get to speak as well on this point?
I think there was a recommendation presented from, I thought it was a buffer from some board organization that wanted to foster some small group feedback as well.
Thank you. Colleagues, the vote is now on the committee's report as I see Mr. Burrows and then Ms. Queen, and then we'll try to vote. Mr. Burrows.
I just want to publicly say that because of that exchange rubbed me the wrong way, to be transparent. I want to thank Mr. Murray for his service on the budget committee. You did a phenomenal job. You grappled with the issues. You kept the classroom at the forefront of every single thing that you did. And so on behalf of District 8, where I'm elected, I want to thank you for your selfless service on the budget committee. You did a phenomenal job.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Queen? Ms. Queen?
I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. I do apologize. Okay, I just wanted to remind us as the Board of Education, our mission, I have to read, our mission is to ensure equality, synthetic student record management, and access to an educational opportunity. And that's to all students, no matter what race, creed, or color, no matter what disability, no matter what IEP and 504. And it still goes back to, believe it or not, you know, having SRs in the schools, getting mental health, getting everything. So we need to really remember that we are here to support all students. And the mission is accompanied by providing high quality customer service. Our job is to serve our constituents, to serve our students, to serve our parents. And until we learn to do that as a Board of Education, we are failing the residents and the people that we are here to represent. We must give them high quality customer service in everything we do.
Thank you. And I will now ask Ms. Ellis to please call the roll regarding the committee's report. Ms. Ellis, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed?
No.
I'm sorry.
No. No.
Thank you. Ms. Buza-Strother?
Yes.
Mr. Burrows?
No.
Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
No.
Mrs. Queen?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Swan?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Aye.
Mr. Wallace?
Vote aye.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Thornton?
Yes. Thank
So
you,
it's
colleagues. The vote is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
10 and 3.
10 to 3. Thank you, colleagues. And thank you for that rich discussion of a very difficult issue, colleagues. And I think we've come to a point where we can move forward on this issue. And Dr. Golson, we look forward to your continued leadership on this. If we can go now to item 8.0, which is unfinished business second reader, our capital improvement program. Dr. Golson, if you'll introduce item 8.1.
Item 8.1 requires board approval of the capital improvement program for fiscal years 2022 through 2027.
And the recommendation from the OBAFA committee, Ms. Williams, is to approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Williams, you're moving. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Ms. Williams and Mr. Valentine, and I recognize Ms. Ahmed.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Colleagues, I've been doing some analysis on the CIP budget since it was sent and put up on board docs. Administration, I'm gonna try and go through this, but don't feel the need to to respond to all of the things that I'm saying. I just wanted to kind of get it out there what I've been looking at. And so what I saw was that between last year and this year, nearly all the projects that we've had have increased in cost, ranging from 9% to 89%. This has led to a $181 million total cost increase for those projects that have carried over from last year to this year. So that's a 19% increase that I calculated based upon looking at last year's numbers and this year's number. To put that in context, according to a report of the Office of Legislative Oversight, the national school construction costs per square foot have increased 18% from 2008 to 2014. So that's over 6 years. They had 18% over 6 years, and we have 19% over 1 year. Granted, we're looking at a couple different types of numbers here. So I was just basically trying to figure out what could cause us to increase this amount over 1 year's time period. And I thought, well, administration has told us so many times that the increasing cost is because of increasing cost of construction. So that's probably the bulk of the increase. That's the logic that I was following in my head. So I looked into that. And then I found, though, that no, construction cost is not the bulk of the increase. When I did crunch the numbers, it seemed to me that only 39% of the increase in total cost is due to an increase in construction costs, which means 61% is due to other costs or contingency funds. And so I started looking at that, and I found that there were 4 things in particular that were really concerning to me, and I wanted to bring that to light for y'all. The first one is that the contingency is leveled at 5%, although repeatedly in the Administrative Procedures Guide for the IAC, it says that the state will only cover 2.5% contingency. And I know for a fact that we've operated with less than 2% contingency on some of our recent projects like Glenarden Woods. So in my opinion, I think that that needs to be dropped to 2.5% so that we don't come out of pocket for local dollars with those contingencies. There's also the architecture and engineering fees that are listed as 7% of the building and site costs. And I think that that's also higher than needed. It's, to my understanding, the industry standard is somewhere between 5 and 6%. There's also this piece about CMR general condition, which is listed at 6%. I think that might be there's some issue there because general condition is for CMAs, not for CMRs. And so I think that needs to be completely dropped. And then the last piece here is FF&E, which is furniture and equipment, which is listed at 7.5%. I was looking at a study of the DMV counties on the Virginia side from 2018, and no one has that high at all, like no one. DC had it set at 3%, and I think that we could probably do that too with competitive bidding. I say all that to say, I'd like to put a friendly amendment on the floor to the motion, to see if all project requests, we can cap the contingency at 2.5%, the architecture and engineering fees at 6% instead of 7%, FF&E at 3%, and then also remove the CMR general condition allocations. Is that an amendment that is welcome by the motioner?
Although I appreciate all of your analysis, since I understand the industry, it can be very complex. So I do not accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, I'd like to put it on the floor now as a substitute motion then.
Okay.
So the motion.
Ms. Ahmed has offered a substitute motion with those amendments. Ms. Queen has seconded. If we could move to a vote on Ms. Ahmed's motion with your permission. Okay, here we go. Mr. Valentine and then Mr. Burrows.
It's a point of clarification. I mean, before I vote, and I appreciate your analysis too, Ms. Ahmed. But I'm curious what the impact this would be on our ability to identify those who we need to get the work done, and whether that cap has any impact on the ability to do that. So, Dr. Golson, if this passes, how does this change you and your staff's ability to get the work done?
So what it ends up doing is if you put the cap on, then that means obviously that's money that we won't be seeking from the state. But in order for the projects to continue to move on, now that means the county council and county government is going to have to cover that difference between what the because we would have gone in at a lower amount and in order to still get those buildings done. And then as Ms. Williams shared, it varies per project. You know, in that soft cost, we have to look at design, furniture, fixtures, you know, we have to take into account everything. So the fact that we're now a one-to-one district, we have to make sure that we create an infrastructure that by additional technology to ensure that even in those buildings, they're one-to-one. But more importantly, like an example would be, we've had to do a lot of additional funds for design at Suitland High School to give an example, because when we first started, we thought that we could do on-site construction while students were there as the as the architects started walking the building, realized that building is extremely old, that then we would have additional temps now in order to do that building. So when you do that, now that means you got another design, and that costs money too. They can't just use the same design and say, oh, just flip it. So each project has its own nuances. And because our infrastructure is so old, we run into so many problems, and we try to build in all those contingencies. Once again, these are approximate costs, not exact. And we try to take in account that, remember, it takes a long time to go through the process. So what amount last year, it increases over time each time we present it.
And I appreciate, I just want to say one thing. I appreciate you, Dr. Golson, as former CEO, as the person who was really put in charge of building Wise High School. You know, that was incredibly important in your selection, that we have someone at this point in time, we're trying to do so much at the helm. And so I appreciate your input and your insight on this and the impact it would have on our budget, particularly at the county council level. So thank you. Mr.
Burrows.
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you, colleague. Mr. Swan, and I think
I didn't have my hand. I think that was Mr. Wallace.
Mr. Wallace, I'm sorry. Mr. Wallace.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to be sure that we're on the substitute motion, not the original.
We're on the substitute.
Okay, I have a question for the original.
Thank you, thank you. In case the substitute, Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams.
And I just wanted to make a point that what we don't spend, we just don't spend it. So I'd rather have more money in the budget in the beginning and then see a return versus coming back and asking for a change order because we found some unforeseen conditions in either the site, the building, or some issue.
Thank you, colleagues. We will now vote on Mr. Burns, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I just like, Ms. Ahmed, you know, I ask that you write down this motion that you're presenting, and with the rationale and the evidence that has, you know, gotten you to this place, because I know you do your research all the time, and I appreciate you for doing that. But I think it might be helpful as a board for us just to really, or maybe you come to the budget committee and present everything that you found, just to help educate us more on this topic, so that you know what you know.
I'd be more than willing to do that. Thank you.
That would be good. Ms. Williams, I'm sure you and Ms. Queen would welcome Ms. Ahmed's presence.
Yes, let's make an agenda item for her.
Very good. Ms. Ellis, would you please call the roll on the Ms. Ahmed? I assume your motion is still on the floor, though.
Yes, please.
Okay. Ms. Ellis, call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed? Aye. Mrs. Boozer Strother?
No. No.
Mr. Burrows?
Aye.
Mr. Montero?
No.
Mr. Murray?
Aye.
Mrs. Queen?
Aye.
Mrs. Shepherd? Mrs. Shepherd?
Sorry, can you repeat that motion again? I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Would you like me to do that, Dr. Thornton?
yeah, quickly, please.
The motion is to approve the CIP with all project requests cap contingency at 2.5%, architecture and engineering fees at 6%, FF&E at 3%, and also removing the CMR general condition allocations.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. Ms. Shepherd, your vote, please.
No.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Ms. Ellis.
Mr. Swan?
No.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
No. Also no.
Mrs. Williams?
No.
Dr. Thornton?
No.
5 yeses and 8 noes.
Thank you. Colleagues, we'll return to the original motion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, just had a friendly. I'm on Appendix E. I'm sure maybe it's just my document. Maybe it's been fixed from the committee's review. This looks like Charles Herbert Flowers High School HVAC program. It's identified in Board of Education District 9, County Council District 9, and that's quite a big school to move. So I believe that just needs to be a quick typo corrected.
Thank you. Making a note.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move it to District 6. Okay.
Online learning, it can be moved.
Ms. Ellis, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed,
No.
Ms. Buser-Strother,
Yes.
Mr. Burrows. I can't hear you.
Abstain.
Mr. Montero,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
I'll abstain.
Ms. Queen,
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. Swan,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes, but you need to call Mr. Wallace.
Yes. Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Dr. Thornton.
Yes.
10 yeses, 1 no, and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis, and thank you, Dr. Golson, for the CIP process. Colleagues, we'll now move to item 9.0, which is a new business first reader. Dr. Golson, if you'll introduce item 9.1.
Item 9.1 requires board approval as a first reader.
Thank you, colleagues. Your vote is now on the fiscal year 2021 comprehensive maintenance plan. Those in favor of seeing opposition, please say aye as the first reader. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Ms. King, let the record reflect the first reader for the comprehensive maintenance plan is approved unanimously by the board. Colleagues, we'll now move to item 10.1 as follow-up from the board's work session of September 3rd. Will be posted upon receipt. We'll now have a motion to approve actions taken by the board in executive session. We took actions regarding a report from our CEO regarding administration of our school system. We discussed personnel matters regarding the appointment, employment, and removal of certain employees. We consulted with our general counsel to obtain legal advice on legal matters, and we discussed investigative proceedings resulting from the work of our audit department. Is there a motion to approve action taken in executive session?
So moved.
It's been properly moved and seconded that the actions approved in executive session be approved by the board. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. The ayes have it. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that it's unanimous. Colleague, now a motion is in order to adjourn the meeting of the board.
So moved.
Properly moved by Ms. Queen, and by Mr. Swan that we adjourn the Board of Education meeting. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Thank you, colleagues. Be safe. Mask on from a safe distance. Good night. Good night.
Good night.